Hey everyone, good morning. This is Nishagni and this is Nishagni Tarot, where you receive inspired insights to create an empowered life. A very happy Independence Day to all of you. So today is the 75th Independence Day of India and the 75th year, from the time India was freed from oppression, freed from life under the British thumb, and we've come so far, in these 75 years. It's been a very interesting, very loaded past, and I could not be more proud of my country. So a very happy Independence Day to all of you, Indians living in India, Indians living overseas, and anyone who wants to celebrate in the freedom of India. So I hope you have a wonderful day today. So in order to tap into the essence and energy of independence, I decided to create a couple of journal prompts centering around the themes of independence and freedom and what these themes actually mean to all of us, right? So today, the world, we are talking about a lot of things such as oppression, casteism, racism, slavery, and all of these lead back to the colonial rule. So many nations, including India, were forced to become victims to the greed of white colonizers, and most of the time it happened to be British colonizers, and many countries have since then, in the past many decades, have received independence, and they've had to build themselves up from absolutely nothing to where they are today. So today I thought I'd create some journal prompts so that you can use those journal prompts to explore what the themes of independence and freedom actually mean to you. So although I've been doing this in the occasion of the Indian Independence Day, absolutely anyone who belongs to a colonized nation, anyone who is living or who's been living in a society that's been oppressed for a very long time can use these journal prompts and try to hone in to the energies of independence and freedom. So I invite absolutely everyone to participate in these journal prompts. So I have made note of my journal prompts right here, and we will be going through them one by one. I'll be talking to you about the prompts, just giving you some context about what you can explore in relation to each of these prompts, right? And then we will be going through all of the prompts. There are about 9 prompts. So if you want to, pull the cards or journal along with, while I'm doing journal prompts, feel free to do so. Or if you want to just take a look at this video and pull the cards later or journal later, that's perfectly fine too. So be sure to mark this video, save this in your library, and come back another time whenever you feel like you want to channel the energies of independence and freedom. Alright, so let's get started. So the very first prompt that I want to talk about, and let's start with something really simple right now, that is, how am I celebrating my nation's Independence Day? Right? So how are you celebrating it? Are you doing something small, like maybe putting up a flag in front of your house? Or are you doing something big? Maybe you are attending a march. Like for example, in India we have a march that is done throughout the country, different schools, institutions, government agencies, everyone marches, with holding the flags, wearing the colors of our national flag, and then we do a flag hoisting. So this is done all over the country, and absolutely all types of institutions, whether they're governmental, for-profit, not-for-profit, we all do it. And a lot of times we do hoist the flags in our own homes. So what are you doing today to celebrate Independence Day? And while I'm talking about this, there might also be certain times where some of us may not be doing anything big or small on Independence Day, and that's okay too. I want you to think about what you're doing on Independence Day today and how you are celebrating the 75th independence of India, or if it is in your own nation, how do you usually celebrate your Independence Day? Okay, now we will be looking at the second question, which is, what does freedom mean to me? Alright. So now we've explored about how you might be celebrating Independence Day, or in some cases how you want to be celebrating Independence Day as well. So now let's look at what does freedom mean to me, and in this case, what does freedom mean to you? So what I've noticed, especially in the context of India, is that we've had a very conflicted relationship with freedom. And that's mainly because in India, we still sort of retain that internalized racism, internalized oppression, which prevents us from really honing into that freedom. And what I mean is this. So a lot of cultural aspects in India are still driven by the need to please the white people. And that's mainly because it comes from more than 300 years of oppression from the British, wherein Indians had to mold themselves to fit into the British definition of acceptability. And of course, it's another matter that it never happened, that the British colonizers never considered Indians as their equal, but that mindset is still something that drives a lot of Indians today. So we have a very conflicted relationship with freedom in the sense that we are physically free, but a lot of our mental attitudes and cultural attitudes are still driven by the need to please the white folks or the white communities. So what I want you to do now is take some time and focus on what freedom means to you. What have you noticed about freedom that resonates with you? How do you react to the terms freedom and independence? And how does freedom, or rather how do you embody freedom in your own life? So I want you to take some moment and maybe pull cards or write about that. Alright. Let's go on to the third prompt, which is, and now we're going to be getting a little deeper into the whole energies of freedom and independence. How might life have been like without freedom? So far we've looked at what freedom means to you. But now let's go into sort of visualization or an imagination perspective. The truth is, a lot of us born today or living today, we were not born at the time during our struggle for independence. We may have older relatives who did, participate in the freedom struggle, and they may be very old now, or they may have passed on. But currently, a lot of us who are alive today have come from a time, or we were born at a time when already our nations were independent. Like for me, I was born years after the Indian independence, and I was born a free person. I was not born under the colonial rule. So if I want to consider what life must have been like for my ancestors, for my great-grandparents and their parents and their parents, so what I want you to do is get into that mindset of the ancient times, or rather the ancestral times. I want you to think about what life may have been like without freedom, what life may have been like under the colonial rule, or under the oppression of your oppressor. What might life have been like? So just think about it, and what I want you to do is also do some research. I want you to do some research about the history of your location. And considering in terms of India, I want you to do some research about how India's whole struggle under the colonial rule took place. Was there something specific that happened in your region that has defined life and changed life forever? What might your ancestors have experienced in a period of time when they were not free people? They were essentially considered inferior and the property of another, invading group. What might life have been like for them? What things were they allowed to do? What things were they not allowed to do? Were they allowed to go places, or were they banned from different places? For example, in India, when the colonizers were present, a lot of restaurants and or the office buildings used to contain a signboard which said Indians and dogs not allowed. And that's true, Indians and dogs not allowed, or Indians and dogs to take the back entrance. So they used to equate our people with animals, and they would not have the same rights and resources as the white colonizers and their communities. So consider, do some research into the past, into your own history, into your geographical history, into your own ancestral history, and consider what life would have been like for your ancestors during the time when they were not free and they were under the colonial rule. Now, let's go to the next question. Alright? How might my life have been like without freedom? So far we've been looking at, how life might have been like for our ancestors, right? So now let's consider what our lives may have been like had our countries never achieved freedom and we were still living under the thumb of the Britishers or the particular oppressor in your land. So for my case, I am going to be talking about the Britishers. So what I consider my life to have been like had India not got freedom, had I been born as a property of the British crown, living under them and considered as, a lesser nation, considered as savages who needed to be ruled and who needed to be shown the right path. What might my life have been like? Would I have had the same privilege to, for example, make this video? So the fact that I am able to openly make this video, share it to the world and talk about my feelings and my thoughts about freedom, independence and oppression is a sign that I have the privilege to do so. But if you were living as the oppressed at a time when someone was oppressing you, you would not have the freedom to create such content, to share such content, because your life and your family's life would have been in danger. That's one thing, and that's a very big thing. Now let's consider what our lives could have been like on a smaller scale. Like for example, if I wanted to go to a shop to buy something, would I have been allowed to go there and purchase it? Or would I have been banned from that place because of my being an Indian citizen, because of my not being a white or a British citizen? Would that have impacted me? Would I have got access to, electricity, to water, to food, to shelter? Would I have been allowed to have my own bank account and own my own money? Would I have been allowed to stay on my land, or would I have been pushed out of my land because the white oppressors just one day, got up and decided that they wanted to take this land, right? So I want you to think of how your life might have turned out had your country not got freedom, or had your country still been oppressed by your oppressors. So once again, historical research can help you a lot here, because once you understand how your ancestors lived, you will get a better understanding of how your life may have turned out if you had been, born as a colonized person, as not a free person, right? So I want you to consider that, maybe pull some cards or just write about your feelings of how life may have been had you been born during colonized times. Alright. So let's go to the next question, which is, what do I have today that my ancestors did not have before? So, what do I have today that my ancestors did not have before? And this is essentially because, or thanks to, the freedom that we've been given, right? The freedom that we've achieved, that our ancestors have achieved, and that we can so proudly move around with our head held high. So what do I have today that my ancestors did not have before? And what I have today, thanks to the freedom that my ancestors have fought for and earned for me, and they've gifted to me, right? So what do I have today? If I have to talk about it in my own life, again, it has to stem to or rather go down to the fact that first off, I have the freedom to air my opinions about colonization, about race, about casteism, about culture, without worrying that I may be jailed or I may be killed or my family may face some sort of a repercussion because of my being so vocal about it. So that's one of the things that I have received as a gift, which my ancestors did not have, because they lived under constant fear that that a British governor would one day take offense to something that was going on and raise an entire village, right? Another thing that I don't have to worry about is that while I do have to pay taxes to the government, and that's obviously natural, normal, and I urge all of you to continue to pay taxes to your government, that's the right thing to do, but these taxes are never going to be something that will lead me into starvation and destruction. Like for example, take the Bengal famines. The Bengal famines happened because the state of Bengal was having a drought, they were having a huge famine, and the crops were not growing, and yet the British colonizers were insistent on collecting the taxes from the poor villagers, and they would take absolutely everything from them, and ultimately it resulted in thousands of villagers dying due to starvation. And if you were to I think I'll put up a photo of how the people who suffered the Bengal famine looked like as a result of the atrocities that the British performed on them. So I will put that photo up right now, so let's just look at those. So, as you can see, things were very bad, and my ancestors had to go through that, so today I don't have to go through that myself, right? And I'm sure that there are a lot of things that your ancestors went through that you don't have to go through right now, that because of their struggle, their fight for freedom, because of the suffering that they took on, now today we are able to live privileged lives with our head held high. We are able to lead safe lives. So what I want you to do is focus on, what things that you have today that you might not have had ever were you born under the colonial rule, or were you never given freedom, right? Let's just journal about that. Now, let's go on to the next question, or the next journal prompt. When I say question, I always think of a teacher asking me some questions, alright? So, this is the next journal prompt. What sacrifices did my ancestors make so I can live life the way I am today? Alright. So far we've looked at how life might have been like for our ancestors, how life might have been like for us had we been born under colonial rule, and we also looked at what benefits that we have today that our ancestors did not have before, and that we have thanks to the freedom that they earned for us, right? So we looked at all the benefits, how life was different and so on. But let's just go back a bit and consider the sacrifices and the work that our ancestors put in so we can achieve, or so we can live our lives the way we are doing today. This is a really, really important thing to consider, right? Because once again, I would like to talk about the conflicted relationship that Indians have with freedom. And a lot of us fail to really think about the struggles and the sacrifices that our ancestors made so we could live these lives today. And I am sure that there are people all over the world, who come from oppressed nations, oppressed communities, younger people who probably may not think about these questions because we have been born into this privilege, we have been born into this freedom, so we take it for granted. right? That's what happens when you're born into freedom, when you are born into a free space. You start to take it for granted because you don't know what you were missing out on before, or what your ancestors were missing out on before. You don't know what life might have been like before freedom, before the end of oppression, before the end of the colonial period, right? So we have been raised in a society where we expect freedom, where we expect respect, where we expect, being treated as equals, irrespective of our skin color or our, country of origin or our monetary, financial status and so on. So we need to really stop and think about the sacrifices that our ancestors made so we could experience this life of privilege today. So we could be in this space where, we can literally just look people in the eye and say, hey, you can't treat me like this. You can't treat me like I'm lesser than you. Right? So what sacrifices did they go through? What struggles did they go through? Did they give up their lives? And if you actually go back far enough, if you have access, especially if you come from a country where you have access to your genealogical records, I really urge you to go down to your wherever city council or wherever these genealogical records are located and look through the records of your family to find out if you have had a freedom fighter in your lineage, right, in your history, in your ancestry, or whether if your family members were victims of marauders coming in and destroying the village and killing people, or taking away the land that they owned, taking away the resources that they had. So try to figure out what sacrifices that they made. For example, a lot of freedom fighters in India, prior to independence, they left their families, they went underground because, being underground was one of the only ways that they could actively, move against the British. And they left their families for years because they wanted to ensure that the entire country, which they considered as their large extended family, to benefit from freedom, to get independence, to finally be rid of the British colonial rule. Right? So what kind of sacrifice did they go through? Did they experience any physical harm? Or did their mental health take a toll? How were the families of freedom fighters treated? Were they discriminated against by British officers who were stationed there, or the oppressing officers who were stationed near them? Or were they sort of ostracized from the community by their own people because everyone was afraid about what calamity that this particular person or this family might bring on them? What kind of struggles did they go through? What sacrifices did they make so that finally, decades later, you could benefit from their hard work? You could live life in a free space where you got your respect. Right? So what sacrifices did they make? So just do your historical research. Maybe even visualize what life might have been like. One thing that does help is visualizing yourself in their place. If you were under colonial rule right now and you had to build a better future for your children, for your grandchildren, for your great-grandchildren, what sacrifices will you be willing to make for them? Alright, let's go to the next one. Am I doing justice to this freedom? Am I doing justice to this freedom? So now we've finished the part where we've focused on how the past relates to the present. Now let's come back to the present and let's look at the terms of, or rather the energies of independence and freedom from the lens of what we are doing and how we as a community, as a society are engaging with this freedom that we have today. So am I doing justice to this freedom? Are you doing justice to this freedom? So what I mean by this is, I want you to consider, are you using this freedom for the right means? Are you using this freedom to lead your life to your highest potential? Because as we've already discussed, as you've already explored through your personal journey, journaling process, or through your tarot or oracle pull process, we've explored how our ancestors struggled, they suffered, and they finally were able to come to a space where they could gift us this freedom. Literally gift wrapped for all of us, right? Us younger generations especially, freedom was gift wrapped to us. We were born into this freedom, right? We were born into this independent nation. So, as we've discussed already, it can become very easy for us to take freedom and independence for granted. So, are we doing justice to this freedom? Are we doing justice to all the struggles that our ancestors have, experienced or gone through for us, for our sake, right? Are we continuing to perpetuate colonial ideas? Are we continuing to champion those evils of racism, casteism, slavery, and so on? Or have we moved past that? Have we become mature communities who value freedom, who value independence, and who know that all these benefits that we have today have come at a cost, have come at a price, and most often that price was blood, right? And are we living life to our highest potential? Are we helping our communities, the oppressed who are still living today, help get out of that oppression and find lives of empowerment? Are we helping our nations, develop and move forward? What are we doing? Are we honoring this freedom that we've been given today? Are we doing justice to the freedom that we've been given right now? So I want you to question yourself, like in your life, how have you treated this freedom? How have you treated your independence? And I want you to focus on what you've done, what you haven't done, what you want to do, and what changes you want to see in society's treatment of the independence and freedom that they have, right? So take some time. So all of these questions are extremely loaded, right? So I want you to take your time. And if you don't want to do, if you don't want to journal all of these questions together, that's completely fine. Take it one day at a time. Take it 1 week at a time. That's okay. But I want you to really consider the value of the freedom and independence that you are celebrating today, that I am celebrating today, right? So think about it. Think about whether you are doing justice to this freedom, justice to the independence that you've been given, and whether that's enough, or should you do more? Should society do more? Let's journal about that. Let's go on to the next question. We have just 2 more prompts left, and so the next prompt is, what can I do to honor the freedom I've been given and to pass it forward? Right. So, in the previous prompt, we explored about whether we are doing justice to our freedom or not, whether we are honoring the freedom and independence that we've been given. Now we're focusing on how we can pass it forward. And specifically, I mean in terms of how we can raise our children, our youngsters, in this space where they respect the freedom that they're born into, they respect the independence that they're born into, and they understand the privilege that they have. How do we pass it forward? Because with every passing generation, with every passing decade, fewer people will understand the baggage that comes with having a colonial past. Fewer people will truly empathize with the complicated and convoluted history of their nation. Right? Already people in my cohort, my community, my age group, we don't fully understand the struggles that our ancestors went through. And I am certain that my children, my great-grandchildren, so they all will have a lesser understanding compared to us of what freedom actually means to India. So how can I prevent that time where they don't really understand and they don't really appreciate the freedom and the independence that they've been born into? How can I make sure that my lineage continues to appreciate this independence, this freedom, instead of taking it for granted? What can I do to instill that sense of nationalism in them so that they always understand that their country has been through a lot and that they are the results or the consequences or rather the desired future for whom all of our ancestors did all of this work, went through all of this suffering, right? How do I pay it forward? So for example, do you take them to museums to learn about their history? Do you give them books to read about the country's colonial past? Do you talk to them about the stories in your own lineage, in your own ancestry, of your own great grandparents, or even up the ladder, right? How do you pass it forward? How do you start to make future generations also be completely cognizant of the fact that this freedom, this independence is not something to be taken for granted, and it is something to be cherished with all of our hearts and all of our souls. So how do we pass it forward? How do we pass forward the feelings of nationalism, of freedom, of independence, and of appreciating the privilege that we are born into? Let's journal about that. Alright, so now we'll come to the last journal prompt in this series of prompts for independence and freedom, and that is, what role can I play to champion my country's interests in this world? Alright, so far we've explored the themes of freedom, of independence, of living life of privilege, of being cognizant of our positions in society, and of appreciating the struggles that our ancestors have gone through, right? Now let's look at one, how we as individuals can champion our country's interests, and two, how we as a community can champion our country's interests in the world, in the outside world. So now what I want you to do is think about how you can contribute to your country. First off, can you write from spreading posts or content about the good things that your country has done, the good achievements that your country has done, what your country has, whether it's the government position or from an individual's position, what good benefits are there. For example, did you know that India is one of the only few countries in the world which has a transgender for a police commissioner, commissioner of police? That is, in my state, the commissioner of police is a transgender person, right? And we also have quotas for transgender representation in politics and government. Not many countries have that. Yet, if you look at the global way in which India has been perceived, many people will not even be aware that such kind of representation, such kind of positions are being awarded to trans communities, right? So this is something that India has done good. So think of what you can do in terms of, let's say, this particular news. So for example, sharing it on social media, telling your friends about it, right? Or creating content about it. Or it could also be in terms of planting more trees, so India can become a sustainable country with a very green nation, bringing down carbon emissions. You could you could consider what you can do in terms of conservation, art conservation, wildlife conservation, or how you can make India an ally country for the queer community. I mean, after all, India has a huge mythological and philosophical heritage where there are a lot of queer people or queer characters in our mythology. So how can you bring back that essence into reality? How can you frame laws that can make our country more forward, more accepting, more inclusive, more accessible, right? And so think of all the different ways in which that you can contribute. Can you start marches? Can you be an active advocate for something? Or can you raise your children in a way where they can be allies to different marginalized communities, where they can come together and help marginalized and oppressed communities get out of that state of oppression. So what can you do? What can you as an individual do, and what can you as a community do to raise your country's current standing so that you can contribute to the development of your nation and work towards making your nation a superpower in the world today? This is really important because a lot of us from oppressed communities, from oppressed countries, from ex-colonial countries, all of us have, we were some of the most, and I'm not just talking about India, I'm talking about all communities that were oppressed, all indigenous, all BIPOC communities, right? All BIPOC countries. We were all some of the most, like economically strongest, culturally forward nations before the time of colonization, right? A lot of our countries were like that. But colonization stripped our nations of everything. And we went from being the top dogs to coming all the way down to the bottom. And getting back from the bottom layer to the top has not been easy. And the way, even in India, we see a lot of problems with infrastructure, healthcare, medicine, or defense, so on. A lot of it does stem back to what colonial rule did to us, what colonial rule took away from us. And if our colonized nations were not colonized, we would have been much, much farther away by leaps and bounds compared to the white communities or to the oppressor communities. That's a fact, right? So understanding what we can do to help our nations pick up these broken pieces, and build the country back together so we can become, countries of worth, countries or superpowers or communities that can stand on their own and that can look at the oppressors in the eye and say, no more, you can't push us down anymore, and take their place in the global world, right? in the global landscape. What can you as an individual and what can your community do together to help our countries reach that position? So at the end of the day, we are the futures of our countries. Our children are the futures of our countries. And it is up to us to help our oppressed nations, help our countries remove the stigma of colonization, get rid of the stink of colonization and reach the top, become superpowers. So, yeah, I would like you to think about this and journal about this as well. So this brings me to the end of the journal prompts on the themes of oppression, independence and freedom. And first of all, thank you so much for being with me this long. This has been a very emotional journaling prompt session for me, and when I was crafting these questions, I was really trying to dig deep and figure out what I personally would like to explore in terms of my relationship to independence and freedom and my relationship to my free country. And this has been the 75th year of freedom. And what has my role been in my country's freedom, and what more can I do to help my country, my free nation, develop and grow? And I know that a lot of you do want to participate actively in your country's freedom, in your country's growth. And I hope that these journal prompts have been of some use to you. So come back as often as you like to work on these prompts, save this video, and share this video with anyone who wants to participate in this journaling session as well. Alright, so these questions aren't just for people who want to pull tarot cards or oracle cards. They are for anyone who wants to explore the themes of freedom and independence in relation to their own life and in relation to the lives of their communities. Alright, thank you so much for watching this video and for being part of this incredibly cathartic process, and I hope these prompts empower you to empower your nation. Alright, thank you so much for listening. A very happy Independence Day to all of you, and I hope you have a phenomenal weekend. Thank you everyone. Bye bye.